All right, dear students, let's continue here. So in this lesson, what I want to do is basically, well, we did a lot of stuff. We basically have all our services set up in place, gateway and all that shenanigans. And now I basically want to spend some more time into instrumentation, right? And what is instrumentation? Instrumentation is basically making sure that we have logging already, but we also want to have some metrics, right? For example, what metrics do we want? Maybe we want to have a counter that basically counts each time we access some kind of a... I'm going to show you. Let's... it's better to do this with an example here. Let's do code. Let's boot this thing up here real quick. I'm going to basically also do the settings here for you. Make it a little bit bigger in font size. That seems to be fine. Let's close all editors here. Right, so in our aggregator, that's basically the victim, right, that we're going to use to implement, to basically completely orchestrate, right? So basically your metrics, you should have metrics for each single service, right? You should have metrics for the distance calculator, for the data receiver, for the gateway and all that stuff. But I'm going to show you how to completely finish up one single service. And then maybe as an as a practice, you can do that for all the others, right? Depends on what you want to do, right? If you don't want to do it, you don't want to do it. So the aggregator is basically the target of choice, right? And let's open up the aggregator, and we're going to see here, we're going to have middleware, right? And we have this log middleware, which basically is going to log each time we aggregate the distance. It's going to log each time we calculate an invoice, right? And we're going to do the same approach, and we're going to do that with Prometheus, right? And Prometheus is basically, it's a daemon that runs on your system, and it will basically scrape metrics from the Prometheus client, from a Prometheus endpoint that we need to configure, right? And then you can basically expose that to Grafana and all that stuff. But first of all, we're going to do Prometheus real quick. And then probably in the next episode, we're going to use Grafana, right? So I'm going to show you one of the two most used things to do metrics, right? Yeah, without any further ado. So basically what we need to do first is, let me go back here. Let me go code Prometheus. Right, and I have already Prometheus installed, but I'm going to delete it, so I'm going to install it with you. It's very important that you guys know that. By the end of the day, basically, a Prometheus daemon will be run by your DevOps team on some server. But yeah, for testing purposes, if you want to play around with it, you need to install it. You can install it with Docker, or you can install it natively. Because I'm running on WSL 2 with Windows, there's a little bit of problematic problems that come in with Docker network bridging, and there are solutions, but I didn't implement them on this system. So I'm going to install it basically natively, right? So I'm going to basically do rm rm-rf, and I'm going to delete Prometheus here, right? Boom. And then I'm going to basically try to open up a browser thingy here. Boom, just like that. I'm going to boot up the font size for the blind homies. Let's do github.com Prometheus, right? This is client Golang, that's for later on. First of all, we're gonna basically take Prometheus here, and the documentation is telling everything we need to know, right? This is how to run this with Docker. So hey, if you want to run it in Docker, perfectly fine. If you're on Mac or something, you can use this, but I'm gonna use this, right? So I'm gonna do a git clone here, copy. I'm going to paste that in. So I'm going to clone into Prometheus. I'm going to wait a little bit until it's 100% completed here, right? And I'm going to cd Prometheus, right? And what do we need to do next? Well, let's see. We need to do a make build. That's the only thing, right? So I'm going to say cd... Wait, where are we actually? We're already in Prometheus. It's fine. And then we're going to make build here. Just like that. Right. So what we're going to do is we're going to make another onion, right? Like I said before, the middleware, how we orchestrate or how we instrument our services is basically with a logging, a layer, login middleware layer, and now we're going to add another layer on top of that, which is the metrics layer. And you can have multiple layers, which basically never affect the business logic, never affect the transport. It's just these nice little encapsulated pieces of code, which do not interfere with each other. And that's the beautiful thing, because you can leave them away for testing, and you can pull them back in for production or something, right? Maybe you want only the logging for testing or only the logging for development, and you leave the metrics outside. You see, there is a lot of options, and there is not too much of a hassle involved with that. A little bit of coffee, always good. So now we have Prometheus installed. The first thing we're going to do is we need to run Prometheus, right? The good news is that in our project here, I have a .config file already made. And to be honest, guys, I also have a README here, right? Look at this. And in this README, I basically have some little documentation on how to do that, right? So everything is documented in the README if you want to, exactly what you need to do here, right? So in order to run Prometheus, you need to give it a config file, right? And the config file, I made a .config folder, and we have a Prometheus config in here, right? And there are a lot of stuff in here, but don't worry too much about that, right? We're first going to basically install some clients, right? And then I'm going to basically go over this config and how to configure it, right? That's what we're going to do. Also keep in mind, guys, because a lot of people ask me, hey, but how to deploy to Kubernetes and all that stuff. That's the least of your concern. That's the complete least of your concern. You're an engineer, you're a backend engineer, you're a Golang engineer. We don't care about Kubernetes. Right? It's good that we know the basics of it. But like I said, in every single company that are using Kubernetes, they have a DevOps team, right? And you just handle your services to the DevOps team, and they will do their thing. Of course, if you work for a company and you make small services, you're never going to use Kubernetes, right? You're just going to use AWS or something, and that's is going to be covered in the JSON API. Maybe if you see this video, it should already be up, right? So if you want to, you already done it, probably, right? Okay, cool. Yeah, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to open up this aggregator here, aggregator main. This thing, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to install the Go client for our Prometheus. And I need to make sure that I'm recording perfectly fine, because these videos take a long time. And if I misclick something and it's not recording, it's very bad news, right? So Prometheus here. And then we're going to have something that is called a client Golang. Here, this guy here, boom. We need to install something, but they don't provide us what we need to, which command we need to do. So I'm going to the examples, simple, main, and then they're going to have something like this here, GitHub. I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to basically make it a README, to be honest. And I'm going to say installing the Prometheus native on a system, installing Prometheus Golang client, right? That's what we're gonna do here. Boom, boom, boom. Paste that in. Do some brackets, some dashes, or whatever you're gonna call this, and we're gonna say go get. That's what we need. Go get, so you guys can copy that, right? Perfectly fine. So what we're gonna do is the same thing. Go get. Paste that in. Probably we can't because we already copied something else. No problem. I'm going to do this. Control C, go in here, Control V, press Enter. Right. So now everything is installed what we need. Cool. So how does it work? Right. Stick with me here. So in our main function, we need to expose a handler. Right. Because Prometheus, in its core, the client will already gather a lot of metrics for us without we need to do anything. It will gather how many Go routines are running, how many allocations here, how many time it took to clean up memory, a bunch of metrics, and it's going to expose that on an HTTP route /metrics most of the time, right? So we're gonna do that first, right? So in our aggregator, we already have an HTTP port set up, right? Here, we already have aggregate and invoice. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna make another route. Handle func here, right? And I'm gonna call this /metrics, right? You can call it whatever you want, but /metrics is the industry standard. And we're gonna say here something that is called prom HTTP. This is coming from the package we installed, and we're gonna say handler. To be honest, this needs to be handle, I think. handle, and then we're going to say prom HTTP handler and call it like that, right? That's the only thing we need to do. So if we run our aggregator, look at this. So we are running our aggregator here. And if we go to our website and we do a local host, I think it's 3000/metrics, you see that we have these beautiful metrics right here. Right? And each time we refresh, they're going to change, right? So that's basically what the Prometheus client does, right? Now we can do two things. Or we use Prometheus daemon. We need to have a Prometheus daemon. And this daemon is going to scrape these metrics here, each interval, right? It's going to query your endpoint, and it's going to store them, right? And the daemon is also needed to basically, if we want to have custom metrics, because these metrics, it's all fine that we have these, but we also want to have our custom metrics, right? What could be a custom metric, for example? Well, if you go to our calculator here, for example, it's a service aggregator, probably. Service aggregator, right? So we're going to have, for example, aggregate distance. So each time somebody is calling aggregate distance, we maybe want to record how many requests are going to the aggregate distance, how many times we hit an error, and how long it took to basically calculate or aggregate the distance, right? All this stuff. It's very important because the company where I worked for, we had these big screens, right? Most of the time you're going to have these big screens on the wall and with monitoring the whole stack, right? So we could see if there were too much errors or the latency was basically too high. It popped up with alerts and everything. It was pretty nice. So yeah. Cool. All right, so now we have actually everything set up, right? So our Prometheus is running. Our Prometheus client is pushing metrics, but now we need to run Prometheus itself. So how do we do that? Well, let's go into our toll calculator here, right? And the only thing we need to do is basically call the Prometheus binary, right? So we're going to say dot slash Prometheus. This is the binary, Prometheus. You can actually copy this binary to use a local bin or something, so you don't need to do it like that. And then we're going to say dash config, because we need to provide the config file. Config.file is going to be ./.config, right? It's the folder, the .config folder in our project, and that's going to be Prometheus.yml, right? And if I press enter, it's running. But there's a big problem. Well, I will show you what it is. If we go to our .config here, config Prometheus, you're going to see that we're going to have here a couple things. The toll calculator, that's the job name, right? Actually, to be honest, let's recap this config, but you should already understand what's going on, to be honest. Scrape, these are global settings, right? Global settings. The scrape interval will basically means how many seconds will be between scrapes. Each time the Prometheus daemon is going to scrape your metrics endpoint. 15 seconds. A scrape timeout, how long it can take, and all that shenanigans, right? But we also have scrape configs for a particular job. And this is going to be the aggregator, right? Aggregator, right? So this job name is the aggregator. Because you're going to have multiple job names. For example, you also want to do the distance calculator. So you're going to make a new job name with distance calculator. And that's going to have maybe the same metric spot, but it's going to be another port, right? Because this is a wrong port. Why? Because the aggregator is running on port 3000. Yeah, right? So this is the port it's running, and then it's going to call this metrics path, which is basically going to call this metrics, right? But we only need to specify this. Right, cool. Follow redirects, I have no clue. Scheme HTTP, because we're using HTTP, right? And then you can actually do the scrape interval and scrape timeout. You can configure that per job. Maybe you want to scrape the aggregator metrics much faster than everybody else. Could be the case, right? Okay, cool. Still music going on here, to be honest. I'm so sorry, guys. I fucked it up once again. Yeah, I hope the music wasn't too loud. And I hope it was good music. I don't know, because I didn't hear it, because my headset is basically just noise cancellation, so nobody can, so I have no interference with sounds. Man, it's so annoying. Like, these videos take so much time, and then sometimes something happens, and yeah. But hey, Yeah, okay, cool. So now everything is set up, right? So basically right now we can go to this one and we can do the same command we used, right? We could use this, and this command is in the README, right? We're going to press enter, Prometheus is running, right? So basically, once Prometheus is running and our aggregator is running here, right? We can go to another endpoint, which is going to be called localhost 1990. And if you press enter, we are here. And this is the Prometheus UI. And then we're going to say, we can query some metrics, right? For example, the Go routines, right? You could see the number of Go routines here, execute. So now we're going to see we have 9 Go routines, right? You see this here, 9 Go routines. We can make it a graph. 1 hour is too large, so you're gonna, because we just boot it up, so we're gonna make it smaller, right? And then you could see these things each time you refresh it, you're gonna see that going up or down, depends, right? But now we just we don't make any new Go routines, right? But you can try to make new ones, and you're gonna see that these Go routines are going up, right? If you see this number increasing and increasing and increasing, it's very important, because if you see this number continuously increasing, you know there is a memory leak. You know what I mean? There is there is a memory leak. Very important aspect. Go routines, I always measure this. Well, it's already measured, right? Cool. The next thing we're gonna do is make some custom metrics, right? That's where we are for. So how are we gonna do this? Let's kill this. So we need to go back to serves. No, it's not true. We're going to aggregator middleware, right? And now we're going to make a new middleware here, right? And that's going to be the metrics middleware. It's going to be a structure, and it's going to have the same thing. It's going to have a next, right? Which is going to be the aggregator, like usual, but it's also going to have some metrics, right? The first thing we want is a counter, which is going to be a Prometheus dot counter for counting a request, right? We can actually call that maybe the request counter, a rec counter, because we can have multiple counters, right? Then we're gonna have a request counter and an error counter or something. Then we're gonna do the latency. We're gonna say rec latency, and that's going to be a Prometheus exemplar. That's not true. It's gonna be a Prometheus histogram, right? So then we're gonna say here, we're gonna make a new constructor, new metrics middleware, just like that. Do we need something special? Yeah, we need next here, which is going to be the aggregator, and we're going to return a pointer to the metrics middleware, right? And then we're going to return an metrics middleware, and we're going to say that next is going to be next here, right? What we're going to do is make these counter and its latency first. So we're going to say that the counter, or the rec counter, is going to be a Prometheus. It's going to be a prom auto, by the way, a prom auto. Why is that a prom auto? You can also do a Prometheus new counter, but then you need to register it manually. If you have a prom auto, it will basically register all your metrics automatically. So, hey, I'm lazy, so I like that. I'm an engineer. We are lazy, right? So prom auto, and it's going to be a new counter, right? And this new counter will take in a Prometheus dot-counter options, right? And it's going to be a namespace, I guess, a namespace, and we're going to say, wait, because what I want to do here is, we're going to have a new metrics middleware. Yeah, it's fine. We're going to fix that later on. We're going to say request underscore counter, right? And then we're going to make it a name, which is going to be the same thing. Actually, to be honest, let's make this aggregator, so we can distinguish things from each other. Some prefix, right? Actually, to be honest, I think we don't need to do that, because I think namespace will automatically do something with the name. We will see. We will see. Yeah, I think that's the rec counter, and then we need to make the rec latency, which is going to be a prom auto, a new histogram with an Prometheus new histogram ops. That's fine, the same thing. I'm gonna copy this two bad boys here, paste them in, and we're gonna say it's gonna be the request a latency latency here. Whoa. Latency Latency here. And we need to have buckets here. Why do we need these buckets? That's basically for your histogram, right? And you can make whatever you want, but it's going to be a slice of float 64. We're going to make them, I don't know, maybe 0. Actually, to be honest, 0.1, 0.5, and 1. Something like that. It's for the histogram. Hey, check that out. That's completely out of scope. And actually, I have actually no clue. Right. I just make buckets. 3 buckets. All right. Yeah, so we're going to add these metrics here. We're going to say that the rec counter is going to be the rec counter and the rec latency is going to be the rec latency. Boom. So now we have a new metrics. The next thing we need to do is basically, we need to copy this, right? Log middleware, because we need to implement, because the metrics middleware is going to be a service itself. It's going to be an aggregator service, so we need to implement the same methods, right? So I'm going to say m, which is going to be the metrics middleware. Aggregate distance here, that's fine. So actually, to be honest, I'm going to copy this like that and then return. So it's going to work pretty fine. So what we are going to do is some kind of the same thing. Actually, I'm going to make a new function here because we need, look at that. So basically, it's going to have these 2 functions, right? It needs to implement calculate invoice and it also needs to implement aggregate distance. So let's do that. Metrics middleware. Let me see. Let me copy some stuff out here, actually. Calculate invoice. We're going to copy these 2 things here. Paste that in and return. Because if we want to measure these things, we should have some kind of a shared function, right? Otherwise, we need to do code duplication. So I'm going to say something like func metrics middleware. Let's call observe or something. Observe of push metrics. That's maybe better. Push metrics. And we are going to say a time. A start is a time, and maybe an error, which is going to be an error, and you will see why I'm going to do this later on. Push metrics, something like that. So we're going to say m.rec counter, and we need multiple rec counters because we're going to have a request counter for the aggregate distance and a request counter for the calculate invoice. So we're going to make another one. So we're going to say here rec counter aggregate and a rec counter calculate. So this is the rec counter aggregate. We're going to make a new one, and that's going to be the rec counter for our invoice. No, calculate actually, to be honest. Calculate, which is going to be the rec counter calc, which we still need to make. I'm going to paste that in. Rec counter ag, rec counter calc. We're going to say aggregator request counter. Can we do this? Aggregate. And here we're going to say calculate. Is that going to work? Wait, because actually it's going to be fine. So each time we are here at aggregate distance, we're going to make a defer function here. Defer func, right? It's basically the same approach like we did with that middleware, right? So we're going to say this is going to be a start, which is a time, right? Time now, just like that. And then we're going to say m.latency m.request latency. And actually, we should have 2 request latencies, right? So that's a little bit weird. It's a little bit annoying. Because this is going to be the rec latency for aggregate itself. And now we're going to make a request latency for calculate. So this is going to be aggregate, calculate, request latency, aggregator, and then the request latency for calculate. I hope that makes sense, because we're going to have multiple endpoints, right? Multiple things we can call, so we need to basically instrument these endpoints separately, right? This is basically how you in-depth instrument your service. There's going to be request latency for the calculator, and we're going to copy that and do the same thing for the aggregate function, right? Sweet. So we're going to say here m request. In this case, it's going to be the aggregate, right? So we're going to say m request latency ag dot observe. We're going to say time since start dot seconds, right? Something like this. And then we're going to say m.request count aggregate dot increment, right? That's what we want. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to copy this, and we're going to do the same thing for calculate invoice. We're going to paste that in, but we're going to say request latency calculate, and the request latency rec counter calculate, right? That's what we're going to do. So now we have these beautiful things implemented. So the next thing we're going to do is make this in main aggregator. Where are we? Where is main? Here. Here. So very important aspect right now. So basically, what do we do here? We make a new invoice aggregator, right? And then we make a new metrics middleware. We put in the SVC, this one, and then we make a new logging middleware, and this logging middleware will take in this metrics middleware. So they are all compatible with each other because they implement the same interface. It's like an onion you wrap, right? Hope that makes sense. It's very, very important stuff, guys. Maybe it's hard to grasp, but keep replaying the video, keep doing it over and over, keep playing around with that until you completely understand that. This is so important, and I'm going to emphasize this once again. This is super important. All that other stuff is just programming this, and this is important. This is what it is. You need to know this. All right, let's boot up the aggregator real quick. Can we actually do a Thunder request? Because we have good news, because aggregator can run on its own without a gateway, so that's fine. Localhost 3000/invoice, I think, something like that. So let me try to make a good URL, and let's send. So we're going to have a problem, right? You see missing OBUID. It doesn't matter, because each time we're going to send this, I'm going to click a couple times. It should increment the counter for invoice, right? So let's see if that's going to work. So I'm going to refresh this. And by the way, if you go to status here and you go to targets, you can see that this is going to be an instance, the localhost 300, and the job is the aggregator, right? There's a beautiful label here. The status is up, right? So let's go to Prometheus itself. Can we find an aggregator thing, right? You see, we have here an aggregator request counter aggregate. And we also have an aggregator request counter calculate. So if we click on calculate, that's for the invoice, right? So if we click this and I execute this, nothing is happening. So that's a pain in the ass. That's a pain in the ass. Is something happening for aggregate itself? Also not. Well, that's not good. Let me send a couple of more of these things. Execute is not going to happen. It's actually the calculate. A little bit of a problematic problem here. Let's execute. No, nothing is happening. We have a problem. Let me see what's going on here. Maybe I need to reset that thing, actually, to be honest. I think I do. Let me send a couple times this one. Let me go back here, reset everything, calculate, execute. We should wait because 15 seconds, scrape interval, right? But it's not going to happen here for some reason. No, it's not going to happen. Right, so problematic problem. Let me see what is going on. Service. We have this calculate thing. Where are metrics? Middleware, that's what I need actually, to be honest. We're going to have aggregate distance here. It's the calculate invoice. We're going to start this. Rec counter calculate increment. That should be fine. Request calculate observe. In main, everything should be up actually, to be honest. Metrics middleware with this SVC is fine, it's fine. And then we use that. Yeah. Everything should actually be completely okay. Let me reset that real quick. Make ag. It's just a little inconvenience, not gonna lie here. Let's see what's going on here. What do we have? We have the aggregated request counter. We have some, this is the latency calculated, but that's basically, we can try that, right? You could say aggregated sum or something, execute. But my metrics are not getting pushed. I don't know why it is. For some reason, maybe we have a problem with this one. No. Wait. What is going on? This is the aggregator, right? Localhost invoice. Yeah, it's fine. No OBU. That's all good. Nothing is happening. Request counter aggregate. Let's calculate once again. Execute. No, it's not working. And is that everything we have? Yeah. All right. Problems. And now we can debug them again. Normally it's so easy. I don't understand. Log middleware. All right, what is going on here? Time since increment. Why is this a problem? Do we forgot something here? Request. Wait, maybe it's the same. Do we need to? I'm gonna try something with these namespaces here because I think they could actually interfere with each other. I'm not quite sure. Maybe not, to be honest. But hey, you never know. It's not the first time I had this issue. I'm gonna refresh a couple times here to see if our targets are up. Yeah, that's fine. Let's do. Oh yeah, now we have these two. So that's actually, so it basically interacts with the Prometheus daemon. So that's good. So I want to see the calculate, please. Can we have? Of course, it's going to be 0 because I didn't do anything. Maybe it's not getting triggered or something. I don't know. Let me try some requests here. Missing OBU. Maybe, yeah, should be fine. Wait, but something that I actually see is that we don't get any logging out of this. Normally it should log, right? It should log the error, remember that? So I can see a little bit of a problem, and why is this? So we have next, which is an aggregator. because it should log it. Logging. Next, do we put the next in it? Next is next, right? It's going to be this aggregator thing. It's fine. Yeah. Everything should be good. I don't know what's going on. Let me go to main because I can see that we don't log our shit. Let's delete this metric service real quick. Let's make egg. You're gonna see what I mean. If each time we send, it's not logging anything anymore. Wait, that's because we need to make. We just did it, right? Wait. It's like, yeah, I see, guys. This is so, oh my god, we waste so much time. The problem is that the request itself was blocking the service from being called, right? That's the problem. Now it's gonna work. Yeah, you need to understand what the problem is, right? So basically, I can show you. So we're gonna have an HTTP transport right here. Look at this, HTTP transport. It's going to be this, for example, this invoice, right? It's going to handle get invoice. You see here. So the only way it can work is that we actually call our service, actually call the business logic. And the business logic is here, right? But we were calling, we didn't specify an OBU, and it was not logging because we didn't call our service. We just directly returned a bad request from JSON. That's the problem, man. Hey. Okay, cool. So we're going to say service here. New metrics, middleware, and then we're gonna onion the service, onion the metrics, onion the logging on top of that, and you can make multiple layers, right? So basically, let's reset this once again. Man, these errors, man. It's actually my bad, but hey, shit happens. So we're gonna wait 15 seconds here. Let's already push some stuff, to be honest. Boom, 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 boom. We're gonna make, look at this, we're gonna make these false bad requests, right? And then if we're gonna go to our aggregated request counter and we execute that, now we can see that we have 13 requests, right? Now it's working pretty fine. Look at this, right? Now you can see, let's make it a little bit simpler. You see 13 requests, and if I make some more here, boom, 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 I'm gonna make 4, 5, 6 more. And when I basically execute it again, you can see boom, or we are at 20 requests, right? So it's working pretty fine. So we didn't need to make 1 and 2 here. We can delete that, right? We can make, for example, do it again, the aggregator request aggregate, right? Let's execute that. We have nothing, right? So enable to do that, you could do something like aggregate. I don't think we can end of file. We need to specify something. It's a post request, so we're not going to do that. It's going to take us too much time. But you can see where it's going, right? So the next thing we can do, actually, to be honest, we're going to do some more metrics in the next episode. I want to wrap this up. Actually, let's do it right now. It doesn't matter if the video is too long. It doesn't really matter. So basically, what I also want to do in this middleware is to give you an example. I'm going to rename these things. Request counter can be deleted here. That's perfectly fine. I want to make an error counter here. I'm going to copy these two. I'm going to paste that in, and I'm going to make error counter egg and error counter calculate. And I'm going to make this aggregator error counter for calculate and an error counter for calculate, right? 2 error counter calc, error counter egg. Pretty fine, pretty fine. We need to specify that in here. So I'm going to copy these two things, paste them on top, do it like that. Maybe we're going to do this and do R, counter egg and calc. Pretty fine here. So now we're going to say R counter egg, and copy this and say R counter calc, R counter calc. Boom, calc. Not the calc, but the calculation. Boom. So, yeah, so we have this error is actually simple, right? So what we could do is something like this. If R is not null, We're going to do it with the aggregate, right? No, with the invoice. We're actually going to do it with both. If the error is not nil, what's going on here? If the error is not nil, we can say something like m.r counter from the calculate dot increment, right? And of course, we're going to copy this thing and paste it in the same thing here. That's going to be the R counter aggregate. So the cool stuff is, guys, and I want to emphasize this once again, we are only working in our metrics middleware. We are not touching transport. We are not touching business logic. We are just working here and doing our stuff and call it a day. That's the beautiful thing of it, right? So now we have an R counter. So what's going to happen is each time this function defers and it sees that the error is not nil, it's going to increment that. Right, so you could see, oh shit, if you see your graph spiking up and you have some alerts configured, you're going to see, oh shit, we have so many errors, something is wrong. And then you need to take action. Well, your DevOps team need to take action, right? So yeah, let's reboot this, make ag real quick, boom. Let's do some fake requests here, boom, 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 boom. And now we're going to see here that in our aggregator, we're going to see an... error. Yeah, let's refresh again because it's the scrape interval. Yeah, here. The aggregator error counter calculates, and if we execute that, we can see nothing. Error. Let's make some... Oh, that's aggregate. We need invoice, right? Invoice. And we need to specify the OBU ID, but let's make a fake one. OBU equals some crazy shit, boom, 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 make some errors, and then we're going to execute this and wait 15 seconds because, yeah, it's a scrape interval or something. Yeah, now we're going to see the error spiking, right? Now we have 10 errors here in our calculate. Right, hey, that's it. So now you can see, guys, how to basically use Prometheus. That's actually all you need to know. And you can actually add multiple, you can add gouges and you can add so many metrics you want, but for this case, in my opinion, it's important to have the latency per business logic calculation, the amount of requests that we hit to a specific handler of our service, and of course also an error counter, right? And if you want to know the total sum of the requests, the amount of requests that hit your service in total, right? Because you could hit 10 requests for calculate, but 100 requests for invoice, for aggregate, right? So if you want to see the total request for the aggregator itself, you can just do a simple concatenation. When you don't need to do that in your code, you can do that in Grafana or in Prometheus itself. You can do some scripting stuff there if you really want. Right. Okay, cool. Thanks for this lesson. I see you in the next one.